Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to GEEXX Reads. Today I want to talk about Jade War by Fonda, an image which you will see here. And this is a big book. Anywho, this is the second book in the Greenbone saga. There will be some spoilers because I'm going to be discussing things that happened in the previous book. I'll try and keep the spoilers to this book to a minimum. The story takes place several months after the end of the first book. The head of the Caw clan, has finally passed away. One of the moments that takes place in the previous book is that the person who was incidentally responsible for Lan's death in the first book, believes that his Jade was buried with him, and plans to find a way to basically desecrate the grave and steal the Jade. He makes a reappearance in this book. And then, after the events of the first book, at the end of the first book, he graduated from the Jade Training Academy, and because of the traumatic experience he had using Jade in combat, he basically refused to wear Jade. He refused the Jade he was given upon graduation. Because of that, he basically is being sent to the country of Espenia. He views this as a punishment, but the truth is that he is a Jadeless clan member in a country where wearing Jade is everything. You know, Hilo tells him, just wear Jade and you can stay here, but it's like, this isn't, it's being done for his benefit. He's really not given any choice in the matter, so it is kind of an exile, but he said, and then says he wants to help the clan. They're sending him abroad to get an education. It's like, you will learn stuff there, you will help the clan, but if you won't wear Jade, this is what you have to do. He's not very happy with that, but he does what he is told. He moves to Espenia. That country has a Kekonese, not set as a settlement, a community. People who had gone there for some reason from the island to the mainland during the Many Nations War. Kind of like how, we had Chinese and Japanese immigrants here. They set up, in German and Italian and Irish, and they set up their own little communities. There's a Kekonese community within the country of Espenia, and he goes to live with a family there and makes of it what he can. The Caw and the Ike clan, the No Peak of the Mountain clans, have officially declared peace after the clan war of the first book, but it's a peace on paper only, and they both know it. So they're basically trying to work clandestinely to undermine each other throughout this book. In addition to the events that we see of, because there's war brewing in other countries, Jade is an important part of combat because it enhances your combat abilities. So all of the countries who are involved in the war want more Jade. There is, the island of Kekam would like to remain isolated, but because of the events that are happening in the world, it's really not practical or possible. The Isle of Kekon is kind of a stand-in for Japan. Not entirely, but, and I believe I mentioned that when I reviewed the first book. They are somewhat isolationist. They have, an honor code. The clans basically don't necessarily run the government, but they're important and they have a strong political voice. So it's, it is a blend of Eastern philosophies and, the clans operating a lot similarly to the way a mafia operates. And again, I mentioned that in the first book, and that was Jane Fonda's intention with writing this series, to show, to have basically a mob story, but with an Asian theme and viewpoint, a blending of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and The Godfather. And yeah, there are also elements of Goodfellas in here too, which I believe I mentioned in the first book. Because in spite of the fact that these people are mobsters, basically they're gangsters, the elements of Goodfellas are that you wind up liking these people despite the fact that they're in a mob. That they're basically, not necessarily criminals, because, the clans operate, while they may operate much like, the mafia, they are legitimate. They don't necessarily engage in crime. In this country, gambling is legal, prostitution is legal, and the clans basically run those activities, but they also run restaurants and textile factories, and they're not criminals, but they do operate independently of the law. They are a law unto themselves. Yeah, the basic elements that I've outlined, end in going to Espenia, the world impacting Kekon, the island of Kekon, the two clans still warring against each other, various criminal elements and underworld elements in other countries impacting, the clans and the island. These are the basic overall plot lines that are going on here. There are others. Now, Hilo is, as the head of the clan, he is viewed by most people as a brute, and his preference to solve a problem is to resort to violence. He, not that he's cruel, he just finds it cleaner. It's so much easier to solve a problem if you can beat someone up to solve it. But he shows himself to be a capable and clever leader. He's very tactical. He's very perceptive, much more perceptive than people give him credit for. Shay, his sister, who is the clan's weatherman, basically they run the business side of the clan. She's the one who's always been considered tactical minded, and she is in many ways, but Hilo surprises her quite a bit, and surprises me as a reader, that he does clearly see what the problem is, although he doesn't, he comes at it from his own prejudices a lot of the time. He does have his prejudices against people who don't wear jade. He is very much an interesting character. He reminds me of, again, Goodfellas. What was the character's name? The main character in Goodfellas. I can't remember the character's name. But, you wind up liking him despite the fact that he is who he is. I get the impression that you shouldn't really like this person because he is capable of awful things in the service of his own prejudice. Although he wouldn't see it that way. He doesn't see his prejudice as prejudice. He just sees it as the natural order of things. The one thing I do want to talk about this book is its feel. It reminds me of Empire Strikes Back in a way. And for those of you who aren't familiar, I'm going to talk about that a bit. In the Star Wars saga, Empire Strikes Back is considered the best film of the entire series by many people. But it's also in some ways the darkest because, in the first Star Wars film, our heroes triumph over, unsurmounting odds. They still manage to triumph. In Empire Strikes Back, they basically lose or fail at every turn. Every time you think that something's going right for them, something else goes wrong. You find out, nope, they're not getting better. Things are getting worse, and things get worse and worse and worse and worse. Because, our heroes are just not going to triumph this time. They may not completely 100% fail, but they're not going to, they don't come out on top this time. They don't come out ahead. And that's kind of the impression I got from this book. Even like 3 or 4 chapters in, I'm like, this feels like it's going to be that kind of story where there's not going to be any massive triumph. There's not going to be a great victory at the end. It feels like every step forward is going to be 2 steps back. So it's not bleak, but it's definitely a darker turn, I think, than the previous book. It's still enjoyable. I still very much enjoyed the book. And I am very curious about what's going to happen in the 3rd book, which I need to get. last time I went to the local bookstore, I couldn't find a copy. I may have to get it online. If you've been following me a while, you know I prefer to get, I prefer to support the brick and mortar stores as opposed to shopping online. This book is about 100 pages longer than the first one, and it felt it. It also takes place over a long period of time. You know, well, like I said, it takes place several months after the end of the first book, but then it jumps forward in time. It's been like 3 months. It's been 6 months. It's been, I think, from the start of the book to the end of the book, it's pretty much like 2 or 3 years from the start of the book to the end in a time frame. So there are basically just long gaps where things simmer in the background, some of which we don't see or find out of until much later. But yeah, it's weird because the pacing was still good in spite of the fact that it took place over such a long period of time. I think the pacing was pretty solid. Anyway, that's my review. I liked it. I recommend you read the first book and the second book. Once I manage to get a hold of the third book and read that one, I'll let you know what I think of that. As always, thanks for watching. As always, my stuff is crap. And until next time, good hunting.